David had always prided himself on being a practical man. He didn't believe in things he couldn't see. His father had been the same way, and his grandfather before him. Faith is good for some, his father used to say, but money, power, and reputation, that's what really runs the world. David lived by this philosophy. He worked hard, built a business, and made a name for himself. He had a beautiful house, expensive cars, and a bank account that kept growing. He had everything a man could want, or so he thought. One evening, his son, Ethan, came home from college with a strange request. "Dad, can we talk?" Ethan asked, standing awkwardly by the door. David set down his tablet. "Of course." Ethan hesitated, then sat down across from him. "I've been reading the Bible," he said. "I think there's something wrong in our family." David frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I think we have idols." David chuckled. "Idols? Son, we're not bowing down to statues. We're not some ancient civilization." Ethan shook his head. "Dad, idolatry isn't just about statues. It's about what we worship, what we put before God." David leaned back. "We don't worship anything." Ethan's eyes were serious. "Dad, what do we talk about the most? What do we spend all our time chasing? What do we rely on?" David didn't answer right away. He knew what Ethan was getting at. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept hearing Ethan's words. He got out of bed and walked downstairs to his office. The room was filled with awards, certificates, and framed newspaper articles about his success. He had always believed that his worth came from what he had built. But was that worship? The next morning, Ethan handed him a Bible, open to Exodus 23-5. "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me." David read the words slowly. He had always dismissed the idea of generational consequences, but something in his gut told him to listen. Ethan continued. "Dad, look at Grandpa, look at his father. They lived for success, for money, but they were never happy. They never had peace, and neither do you." David stood up, suddenly angry. "I worked hard for what we have. I did what I had to do." Ethan's voice was quiet. "And is it enough?" David didn't answer. That night, he had a dream. He was in his childhood home. The house was dark, but he could hear voices, his father, his grandfather. They were arguing about business, about money, about power. In the center of the room was an altar covered in gold coins and stock certificates. David stepped closer and saw his own reflection in the polished surface. He turned to his father. "What is this?" His father's voice was distant. "It's what we serve." David reached out to touch the altar, but the moment his fingers brushed against it, it cracked. A deep, hollow sound echoed through the house. The walls trembled. The coins turned to dust. Then he woke up. His hands were shaking. The next morning, he found Ethan reading Deuteronomy 6:5. "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength." David sat down heavily. "How do we fix this?" Ethan closed the Bible. "We repent. We renounce idolatry. We dedicate our lives and our family to Christ." David swallowed hard. He had spent his whole life chasing things that didn't last. He had inherited that mindset from his father, and now his son was asking him to break the cycle. So he did. That Sunday, for the first time in years, David stepped into a church. It felt strange, unfamiliar. But as the worship began, something shifted in him. The weight on his chest lifted. For the first time, he felt free. Generational habits are powerful. They shape us in ways we don't always see. Idolatry isn't always about statues. It's about what we trust, what we love, what we put before God. David had spent his life worshiping success, but success had never satisfied him. It had only enslaved him. Breaking free wasn't easy, but it was possible. And it started with one choice: to serve God instead. Because in the end, wealth fades, power crumbles, but God remains.